Well, hello there. Today we are going to discuss how to produce video interviews, and we're also going to go into the 13 steps to better instructional visuals for better presentations. But of course, we will keep this until the end. Alright, let's go into how to produce a video. Interview shoots are very unforgiving. This is a situation in which you must get everything right for the first time and make the job flow smoothly and comfortably for everyone involved. It is a skill which must be a second nature. So you should be well practiced in this art before attempting this mission-critical interview. Preparing for interviews involves several different things. Contracting and making arrangements with the peoples. This is a very important beginning. We should also choose a location. This is equally important. Preparing equipment. If you have faulty equipment, you will find that many of these things will go a lot better. Traveling to the location and setting up. Arrive early and be ready to go. Finally, briefing and technical checks is always an important setup for finishing up. Always be ready for this. Before you begin shooting, double check everything. If you're not 100% sure that it is all working today, stop and get it right. A video interview can be thought as a conversation involving three types of people: the interviewer, the guest, and the viewer. The interviewer is the facilitator. He or she chooses the topic of conversation and tasks and guides the questions and discussions. The guest is the subject of the interview. She will do most of the talking and get most of the camera shots. The viewer is a silent observer who has been invited to the conversation or is just the camera, the people behind the picture. This creates a three-way conversation. A successful interview will include all three groups in a correct mixture. Typically, the interview begins by setting the scene. They invite the viewer to the conversation by introducing the location, guest, and topic. At this point, the interviewer is probably speaking into the camera as if they were looking into the viewer in the eye. Next, the interviewer turns to speak to the guest. Then flows a fairly one-sided conversation in which the interviewer asks questions which are usually designed to encourage the guest to speak, preferably a lot. To wrap it all up, the interviewer usually concludes by thanking the guest. The interviewer may then turn back to the camera and say goodbye to the viewers at home, as well as tidy up any script requirements that may be leading up to the next piece of the program.
Now let's talk about facing. The interviewer will be facing slightly left or slightly right towards the camera. You'll want to avoid severe profile shots, and you should always be able to see both eyes. There are two kinds of shots that you can have. You can have a medium close-up, which is where you can see from the waist up, and you can have a cutaway shot, which is for far or long shots that include the entire body of the interviewer or the guest, or the background scene. For instance, if the guest starts using hand gestures, zoom out so you can see the entire body. The location should be relevant to the content of the interview. Now let's talk about lighting. Soft light is for a more intimate feeling. Bright light is for a more confrontational interview. And framing. Framing can affect the perceived relationship of the interviewer and the guest. For instance, having the interviewer behind the desk conveys a sense of authority. Now let's talk about backgrounds. Check the background to make sure there is nothing distracting from the person speaking. The last thing you want is something growing out of the guest's head. Eye levels are really important. The eye levels of the guest and the interviewer should be the same, because any noticeable difference just looks funny. In the studios, chairs are adjusted to make everyone the same height. And in the fields, well, sometimes you just have to improvise.
Now we would like to explain to you the 13 steps to better instructional visuals for electronic presentations. And there's no better appropriate situation to demonstrate these steps than through this very presentation. In this article, the Instructional Technology Center strives to give pointers on how to more effectively use well-designed electronic presentations, keeping in mind these certain factors. We would like to demonstrate some of these factors by comparing and contrasting the do's and don'ts of visual presentations. First of all, this is an example of a good slide, and this is a bad one. Some of the reasons this is an effective slide is: first, notice the use of colors. Color can be a powerful visual tool if used correctly. Contrasting light colors with a dark background is the best way to do this. Also, the content is simple and short. Only the key words and main concepts are represented, limiting each line or bullet to 5 to 7 words. Also, the heading is differentiated by being slightly larger than the rest of the text in the slide. Typeface is another feature that can help improve visual representations. We want them to enhance the presentation by being legible and having similar thickness at all points. An appropriate font size is about 36. Here are some good examples of good fonts to use. Now back to our bad slide example. First of all, notice how the transition between that slide was very distracting. In general, we want to keep the transition smooth and subtle so we don't distract too much attention away from the message. Instead of using proper contrasting colors, this slide features red and orange, which not only are distracting but difficult to reproduce electronically. We also want to avoid highly textured multicolored fills and loud backgrounds. The typeface also diverts a lot of attention. Many of them are illegible and too small to read. Also, you want to try to limit your presentation to 2 to 3 different types of fonts. Finally, you don't want to squeeze too much information on one page. Each bullet is way too long, and it makes it easy for the audience to get sidetracked. You don't want the text to be exactly what you're going to say verbatim either. Now we're going to highlight a couple other tips in giving effective visual presentations. Whenever possible, substitute text for clip art, pictures, graphs, and diagrams. They can convey complicated information quickly and efficiently. Once again, make sure to keep them simple and use colors proficiently. Label any graphs or diagrams horizontally to make things easier to read for your audience. Keep it simple. If you have more complex information to give to your audience, make handouts. Here are some final points to remember when trying to create better instructional visuals for your electronic presentations. Scan images for best resolution. Use spreadsheets and instructional software with care. Carefully select 35mm slides. Choose appropriate printed visuals and transparencies. Hand letter visuals also can work. And finally, avoid embarrassment. Make sure to check your spelling and grammar. Arrive early to your presentation because you never know what technical problems you might have and what you might need to work out. And just in case, bring in backups, printed copies of your visual presentation. It's better to be safe than sorry.
Well, with all that concluded, thank you for listening to this presentation. It is brought to you by Natalie, Lacey, and Nathan. Have a wonderful afternoon.